Folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. Okay, big question that's been asked over the past few weeks. How on earth did Israel obtain such incredible intelligence in Lebanon and Syria? Obviously, think about Hezbollah in Lebanon first and foremost, where, look, September 17th, Operation Exploding Pager, then the walkie-talkies the following day, decimating Hezbollah, and of course, September 20th. Practically Hezbollah's entire Radwan force military leadership taken out in an airstrike in Beirut. Fast forward a week to Friday, September 27th, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the top overall leader for Hezbollah, the terror master, taken out in yet another Beirut airstrike, and then his successor taken out just a few days later. People are saying, wow, if I'm Hezbollah right now, I'm not using any electronic devices. I'm not running the vacuum cleaner or turning on the microwave. That's how thoroughly they've been infiltrated by Israel and by Israeli intelligence. And a lot of people were saying, wow, how did Israel do it? But not only that, think back to July 31st, I believe, or August 1st, July 31st, Ismail Haniyeh, the top overall leader for Hamas, taken out, but not only taken out, folks, he was taken out in a guest house in Tehran under the Iranian regime's noses. Again, how on earth did Israel get this intelligence? And by the way, Israel has not claimed responsibility for the death of Haniyeh or for Operation Exploding Pager. But I think it seems pretty clear who was behind it. And the world is a better place for it because these are bloodthirsty, demonic, vicious terrorists who want to kill me, you, our kids, and our grandkids and do great damage. And they're being taken off Iran's chessboard, which brings us to, again, who's providing this intel? Well, there are several possibilities. Seems like it would be someone high level in the know with the most intimate goings on within the Iranian regime and within Hezbollah. Could it be, and we're talking a big fish here, could it be the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Quds force? Now, that's the creme de la creme of the Iranian regime. I've compared the IRGC to the Nazis, the SS, under the Nazi regime, but I would say that the IRGC is even more powerful and even more influential within Iran. They answer only to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. They have a hand in everything, the nuclear program, the economy, the terror operations in the region and around the world. But Ismail Ghani is the leader of the IRGC Quds force. Again, that's the elite of the elite in the Iranian regime. Well, the interesting thing is Ismail Ghani has gone missing. Now, again, he's one of the most powerful and influential members or officials in the Iranian regime. Yet he hasn't been seen since September 27th, nearly 2 weeks. What gives? This isn't normal. Something is going on here. Now, Ghani is, to give you an idea of his power, and he's not nearly as powerful as Qasem Soleimani was. Qasem Soleimani, next to the supreme leader in Iran, was probably the most important man in the entire regime. That was prior to him being taken out when he landed in Baghdad in January 2020 on orders of then President Trump. But Ismail Ghani is his successor. And while Ismail Ghani is not the charismatic, galvanizing force for jihadis that Qasem Soleimani was, he's still a major player. Now there are reports since he's been missing, since September 27th, initial reports were, wow, Ismail Ghani hasn't been seen. Perhaps he was in the bunker with Nasrallah. Maybe he's dead. Or maybe he was in the bunker with Nasrallah's successor. Maybe he was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Now we're hearing Ismail Ghani may indeed have been a spy. Now, again, this is not rock solid. This is it. But there are rumblings in the region, serious rumblings, that Ismail Ghani may have been a mole for Israel, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Here's more from the Jerusalem Post. Here's the headline. Ismail Ghani, is alive and is currently being interrogated in Iran, sources claim. The Islamic Republic of Iran is currently researching security breaches with sources claiming that Ismail Ghani and his team were under isolation right now. He's under investigation. He is alive. According to various Middle East reports, a Jerusalem Post kind of compiled them all into one major report that I'm quoting from right now, just reading off my phone. His whereabouts have been unknown since Israel's Saturday strike in Beirut that killed Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah's presumed successor, Hashem Safiuddin. According to the report, Iran is currently researching security breaches with 10 sources from Beirut, Baghdad, and Tehran saying that Ghani and his team are under isolation while they're under examination. And in addition, Israeli media, get this, citing Sky News, reported that Ismail Ghani had suffered from a heart attack during these interrogations by the Iranian regime. Quote, the Iranians have serious suspicions that the Israelis have infiltrated the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, especially those working in the Lebanese arena, read Hezbollah. So everyone is currently under investigation, a source told the Middle East Eye outlet. However, the report also cited a source linked to Hezbollah who alleged unequivocally that the breach was 100% Iranian. Another source said that Ghani is alive, but he's in Beirut being interrogated and not in Iran. But the bottom line is he has not been seen since Nasrallah was taken out on September 27th. Wow. Folks, this would be, to say this would be an absolute earthquake is an understatement. Now, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former Iranian president and known demagogue, said something to this effect last week that, look, in the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, we had basically a Mossad spy. He didn't offer much more beyond that. But Ismail Ghani, did he willingly work with Israel? Or was he somehow bugged, in essence, and Israel was gleaning information from him without his knowledge, without his consent? Folks, we don't know. What we do know is he has not been around. And again, this is a senior figure close to the supreme leader. He has not been around for 13 days. That is not normal, especially in a time of war. Especially, look, when Iran is barraging Israel with 200 ballistic missiles just 9 days ago, and at a time when Israel is ready and willing to strike back hard, as we've discussed here in the live stream over the past few days, Ismail Ghani would be out there in front and center, in the very least, making threats against Israel. If you dare strike us, we'll unleash hell in return, et cetera, et cetera. That's how this works. So what do you think? This is like something out of a James Bond movie, right? Was he a double agent of sorts? What do you think? I mean, talk about a high level asset, if this is indeed true. Would love to get your take on it here. A quick mention here as well, before we go to a great interview that I just conducted about 2 hours ago with Jonathan Schanzer. Folks, I don't say this lightly. He's one of the world's top Middle East analysts. He works for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. Jonathan's very well connected in Israel, around the world, at top government circles. He's got incredible, up-to-date information that you're going to want to hear about a possible Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. That's in a minute. Exclusive interview. Real quick, two things. Number one, this has to be mentioned. Major airstrike in Beirut today, yet again, targeting a senior Hezbollah official. Now, he reportedly survived. That's what we're hearing so far. His name is Wafiq Safa, and it seems that he may have survived this strike, but it was a massive strike. He was apparently a significant figure within Hezbollah. He is accused of using Lebanese ports and border crossings to facilitate the movement of Hezbollah terrorists. So he was not a very pleasant chap, needless to say. But apparently 22 people were killed and 117 injured. These were the deadliest attacks in Beirut since Israel began ramping things up a month ago. Again, it's interesting because Beirut, that Dahia neighborhood in the southern suburbs of Beirut, which has been a Hezbollah stronghold, I think Hezbollah believe they'll never strike us here. Well, that's out the window. Israel now has struck repeatedly in Dahia over the past 2 weeks plus. So perhaps another one bites the dust. Right now, they're saying, well, it looks like he survived. I'll probably have more on that, God willing, for you tomorrow. Another mention before we go, this great interview you won't want to miss with Jonathan Schanzer. Wow, I was riveted. It was such incredible information. You're going to want to hear this. But real quick, we've got a partner for today's live stream, and it is our dear friends from Artza. Now, my relationship with Artza goes back, 5 years. You've been hearing me talk about Artza here on the live stream. It's artzabox.com. And what Artza does is really unique. They put together these incredible, beautiful, top-notch, high-class boxes. You call them almost a gift box, and they're filled with Israeli products made in Israel by Israeli artisans and small businesses. It's literally a taste, a smell, a sight, a sound from Israel, from the Holy Land, delivered at your doorstep in one of these beautiful Artza boxes. Folks, again, this is top line, not only the presentation, but the products themselves. And the great thing is, people keep asking me, how can I help Israel? How can I bless Israel? Well, one way you can do that at a time where Israel's economy is really feeling the effects of war, at a year of war, at a time when northern Israel is a ghost town, southern Israel around the Gaza border is also mainly a ghost town still. That hurts your economy, folks, especially when you're the size of the state of New Jersey as a nation of Israel is. So an economic shot in the arm is one way you can bless Israel, no doubt. And one way to do that is to support Israeli small businesses. Artza is a great one. My dear friend who runs Artza is a member of the Israel Defense Forces Reserves. He's been fighting over the past year, called up, yet he's still running this incredible company. And each new month, each new subscription, you'll have a different theme in the box. This theme is one that Watchman viewers will love for this month's box. It's a biblical archaeology box. I mean, that's right up our alley, right? As Watchmen and women and everyone who watches this channel, the focus of the box is to help people explore and deepen their connection to biblical scripture through authentic products from Israel. You can experience the Bible here in a tangible way. The discount code, by the way, is Watchman. That's MAN for a 10% discount off your Artza box. Look, a great gift for the Israel lover in your life. Christmas coming up, the Christmas shopping season, Hanukkah's coming up. We're in the high holidays right now for Israel and the Jewish people. This is a great gift, especially because right now it's a bit hard to get to Israel with everything going on and getting flights over there. So if you've been to Israel and can't get back, or it's on your bucket list, Artza box is a taste of the Holy Land, again, delivered to your doorstep. And a special note for this biblical archaeology box, with everything going on in Israel, Artza has partnered with two incredible charities. One is an organization founded by and employing IDF veterans who have severe post-traumatic stress syndrome. And the other supports women who've escaped abusive relationships. So a great cause all around. It is artzabox.com. Again, folks, you won't regret this product. It's awesome. My family loves it. When we get a new Artza box, my daughters are excited. What do you have this time? Good stuff. And if it passes the test of a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old girl, it's pretty cool and it's pretty well put together. And that's exactly what Artza boxes are. Artzabox.com, discount code Watchman, that's MAN, for your 10% discount for such a time as this. Bless Israel and pick up an Artza box subscription. You won't regret it. Okay, I think Iran is starting to regret what they brought upon their own heads last week with this historic, in all the wrong ways, ballistic missile attack against Israel. Now the big question, how will Israel respond? That's what everyone's asking. And Jonathan Schanzer has some answers. He's the Senior Vice President for Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C. You can follow him on X and also at fdd.org, but definitely follow him on X. Jonathan's Twitter account has some incredible up-to-date information. I was able to sit down with him earlier, and man, we went around the horn, the entire Middle East, what's going on, what comes next, and how it impacts you. Take a look. And we are here with Jonathan Schanzer. John, what a time to have you here in Dallas at our studio. Look, the Middle East is on fire. It kind of always is on fire, as you know, but A tinderbox now with Israel potentially striking back against Iran, maybe even the nuclear facilities. Is everything on the table right now? Could we see Iran's nuclear program in the crosshairs?
We are looking at that right now. I mean, I think the big question is how much the Biden administration gives the Israelis the leeway to do this, and how confident the Israelis are that they can do this without missing. They got a green light right now from the Biden administration. They got to lock this down. They got to make sure that whatever they target 100%. They don't miss. They don't screw up because, the Iranians, right, they've missed the Israelis on more than 90% of their ballistic missile strikes. The Israelis have been they've been mocking the Iranians out there in the press. You don't want the Iranians doing that in return. There is a psychological warfare battle that's going on right now, so the Israelis can't miss. But we know that the nuclear sites are at least being considered by Israel. One Israeli former official I talked to said, look, if we're going to strike Iran, what's the point if we don't hit those nuclear sites? That said...
That seems to be a good point.
Yeah, it's a good point. That said, the Biden administration is telling the Israelis, you can't do energy, you can't do oil facilities, you can't do nukes. And so that looks like the restrictions that are being put on the Israelis right now.
And doing it publicly, which seems to me problematic, Jonathan, to kind of give the impression of daylight between the U.S. and Israel and telegraph to the Iranian regime what may be coming.
Yeah, and I think, look, that daylight, I think, has been a problem for more than a year now, right? Yeah. The Israelis didn't want 10-7. They didn't want a war in Gaza. They didn't want a war in Lebanon. They didn't want a seven-front war against Iran and all of its proxies. And every time it looks like the Israelis are making an advance on these proxies or on the regime itself, that's when you start to see the most daylight. And it really just doesn't make any sense. It makes you wonder whether this administration wants to see their allies win. We see the same sort of thing, by the way, in Ukraine.
But a valid question.
It's a valid question. But look, in Ukraine, they're like, hey, Ukrainians, you can't hit Russia inside Russian territory. Israelis, you can't hit Iran's nuclear sites. What kind of message are we sending to our adversaries? Yeah. It's all about trying to contain the violence, trying to contain war leading up to the elections. And I understand the political considerations. But when you think about the existential issues that we're looking at right now, we're talking about life and death issues for our allies overseas. I got to tell you, all of the other allies that have enjoyed the architecture of the U.S.-led order in the world, they have to be wondering right now, whether it's the Saudis or whether it's the Europeans, they're all wondering, is this the alliance that we want? Now, I will say in the same breath, we have seen missile defense work really well for the Israelis. U.S.-led defense architecture has been great. Offensively, though, we look like we're a bit wobbly, that we're not sure that we want the good guys to come out and prevail.
I think of the Red Sea, too, with that U.S.-UK coalition, John, not going on the offensive against the Houthis, whereas Israel twice has really hit the Houthis hard and sent a message. You mentioned the success rate, potential success rate of an Israeli strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. How hard a target are those Iranian nuclear sites?
Well, look, some of them are buried deep beneath the ground. Some of them, not so much. I think you could probably hit the centrifuge production facilities. You could probably hit some of the research facilities that don't actually have the hardware. It's all pretty technical. We have a team back in Washington that looks at this stuff day in and day out, and they've been making maps and sort of trying to lay it all out. They're amazing. But, just to kind of put a finer point on that issue of deterrence, the United States has struck a couple of Houthi targets here and there, but we are feckless right now in clearing those shipping lanes in the Red Sea. And that's like 10, 12% of the world's shipping that now needs to be rerouted around Africa. And it's adding cost to all of these products that the Europeans are consuming. But it doesn't even end there. I mean, and I don't think this is fully understood. My colleague Brad Bowman back in D.C., he counts 175 different attacks by the Shiite militias out of Iraq and Syria against American forces. Obviously, we recall there was 3 service members that were killed in Jordan. Tragedy, obviously. But you know how many times the United States has responded? 11. Wow. So what we're looking at right now is an Iranian regime that believes that it can get away with this, They're laughing as the United States restrains Israel. They don't fear us right now. This is not a good message for the Russians. It's not a good message for the Chinese. It's not a good message for the North Koreans. There are a lot of people out there that say that this war that Israel's fighting, that they're fighting on behalf of Western civilization. And in some ways, I think they're right, because the Israelis, if they don't win this war outright, and the Iranians live to fight another day, and they're cooperating with the Chinese, they're cooperating with the Russians, there are global implications for this battle.
Yeah, and you could say, I think in many ways, Jonathan, now that Bibi Netanyahu is in effect the leader of the free world, what's left of the free world. And folks, by the way, this kind of great analysis from Jonathan Schanzer, you can find it on his account at X, of course, and FDD.org. You mentioned China and Russia. We see Iran's ring of fire strategy kind of unraveling right now, it seems. Does Iran now cleave closer to nation states like a China, like a Russia, like perhaps even a Turkey?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, the Turks have come out in weird ways. There are a lot of people that for years have been talking about how the Turks are some kind of natural bulwark because they're Sunnis and the Iranians are Shiites, and that, you know, that the Turks don't want to see the Iranians become this hegemonic power in the Middle East. Well, you got the Turks right now under Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's unhinged, this leader of Turkey. Unhinged. And he's calling for an Islamic coalition to wage war against Israel.
Openly.
Openly. And by the way, this is the same regime that helped Iran. They skirted sanctions, $20 billion worth back in 2012 to 2016. Still haven't paid a price for it. So, you know, we're watching the Iranians and Turks draw closer together. The Russians obviously are benefiting significantly from the ballistic missiles, from the other rockets and drones that the Iranians are producing for their war in Ukraine. And of course, the Chinese are benefiting from the oil that Iran is putting on the market at a discounted rate for the Chinese to consume. So there is an axis of aggressors that is forming. And then that obviously raises the question. You got the United States, a very wobbly Europe, and then you got these embattled democracies like Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. What's the glue for all of this? What's the strategy for victory? I've yet to see the United States articulate this under the Biden-Harris administration, at least not yet, and I find that problematic.
Yeah, it's purely play defense, and that's it really. That Russia-Iran relationship seems like it has to be a quid pro quo relationship, right? As you said, Jonathan, Iran supplying Russia ballistic missiles and drones. What does Iran get in return from that Russia alliance? It's a full-blown alliance now.
It is a full-blown alliance. There's energy, although they are maybe competitors to some extent, right? But obviously the Russians are paying for the weapons, and the Iranians need that hard currency, which they're not getting in a lot of other places because of, well, loosely imposed sanctions by the United States. But the Russians are providing assistance at the United Nations. They're providing diplomatic cover. Broadly speaking, though, I think the Russians, oh, don't forget those S-300s and S-400s, the air defense systems. So there's a military alliance that is forming. It's diplomatic, it's political. This is the kind of thing that if we don't try to disrupt it now, we could begin to see a much more solid axis form to counter the United States. And really, you got to remember, their goal is to undo the U.S.-led world order, right? We've been a superpower. We've gotten a little too comfortable, in my view, and you can see these Axis powers banding together to try to weaken our position worldwide.
Yeah, I've called them the Gathering Storm Coalition: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Israel on the ground right now, Jonathan, in Lebanon, hoping to finish the job with Hezbollah, create a new reality in southern Lebanon, bring the residents of northern Israel home. How is that campaign going? Obviously, Israel has dealt heavy blows to Hezbollah over the past 3 weeks or so. But the ground invasion, a lot of people warned about it, but it seems the IDF is making very good headway so far.
They are making good headway, and they're destroying a lot of those short-range rockets that are tormenting the northern communities of Israel, which was always the goal. But look, there's one major goal that the Israelis have right now, and it's unclear how they're going to reach it. They need to force Hezbollah north of the Litani River. This is the UN Security Council resolution dating back to 2006.
That's about 18 miles from the Israel-Lebanon border,
like that,
roughly?
12 to 18. I forget exactly what the total number is. but they got to push them up there. This is international law that the UN did not enforce.
For 18 years.
For 18 years. You got UNIFIL, right? The interim forces in Lebanon that were supposed to prevent Hezbollah from entrenching. Instead, now what we're finding is there's tunnels that are snaking from southern Lebanon into Israel. The Israelis are now sending out their engineers to destroy those tunnels, fill them up with cement, whatever other ways they're using to destroy them, explosives, etc. But how do you get Hezbollah to do that? And here's the real challenge. Not only are they still a pretty powerful force, they still have probably about 100,000 rockets in their possession. They're destroyed from the leadership perspective, but they still have massive capabilities. Yeah. How do you force them north, especially when you have a government that barely exists? You got, an interim president, a makeshift government, an economy that's destroyed. The political class can't come together. In fact, some of the people ruling Lebanon right now are openly cheering for Hezbollah.
Yes.
And so how do you change the reality? Now, this administration right now is saying they want to install a different president. They want to try to, force Lebanon into a better situation. But I don't know, we keep saying we don't like regime change. It sounds like a lot like regime change, doesn't it?
It truly does.
Right? And so it's a complicated moment. I'd love help from the U.S. here because I don't think the Israelis can do it on their own. I'd like to see the French get involved. They've got historical ties. What I don't see is strategy. We just don't see it coming from this White House. The Israelis right now seem to be doing all the heavy lifting on their own while getting beat up by the international community, getting beat up by the UN. You'd think that right now they'd say, okay, these are the only guys that are sitting there in that boat and rowing.
Doing the world's dirty work,
That's
Israel,
right.
Essentially. Once again, speaking of which, 1981, Israel did the world's dirty work, taking out Saddam's nuclear reactor. 2007, same deal, taking out the Assad regime's nuclear reactor. Man, it seems, as you said, Hezbollah wounded but still dangerous. Hamas wounded, and it's not clear how dangerous they are at this point. What about Hamas right now? With them weakened, I was going to say, just to finish the thought, look, it seems like a clear path to Iran and perhaps those nuclear facilities. But first, Hamas. We're going around the horn here with the Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
Hezbollah, I can't say they're in their death throes, but Hamas, wow. It seems completely decimated.
Look, the estimates I got out of Israel as of, 5-6 days ago, 23 out of 24 brigades destroyed. Wow. Top leaders gone. The only guy that's left really is Yahya Sinwar, the guy that engineered the 10/7 attacks. He's running that organization from tunnels. And he won't even get on the phone because he's afraid the Israelis are going to be able to geolocate him. So he's sending, handwritten notes out to try to direct the war. This does not look like a terrorist group that's going to come back anytime soon.
They signed their own death warrant on October 7th.
They did. And really what they thought they were going to do was to spark a regional war where Israel would get attacked by that entire ring of fire, get hit on 7 fronts. Hezbollah balked. The Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, they don't have the wherewithal. If you go around that ring of fire, they can still fire, rockets and drones, but they're not saturating Israeli airspace. The Houthis, look, they've fired a couple ballistic missiles at Israel. They've fired a couple of drones. They're not gonna, they can't do severe damage, at least not in my estimation right now. So a lot of that ring of fire, it's a nuisance. It can cause death and destruction, but it's not an existential threat. So really what Israel's dealing with right now is a weakened Hezbollah. They got to try to figure out how to sweep the leg, right? That's one. And then after that, then they got this clear path to Iran where they're going to have to figure out how to handle the ballistic missiles that have been falling in Israel. And by the way, I'll just tell you this, the Iranians have missed a lot, right? The first time they launched, they landed about, I think it was 8 missiles landed in Israel out of the 300 or so.
99% intercepted?
99%. That was the first time around. By the way, they also fired a couple of other kinds of rockets, and they fired some drones.
Yeah, they did.
Rockets and drones got knocked out. The ballistic missiles were the ones that got through. So then what you saw was the second round was all ballistic missiles. And more of them got through. Each interceptor that Israel has to burn to knock down one of those ballistic missiles costs $1 million.
Wow.
And so what we're watching is they're learning the physics. They're getting better. They're tweaking the math. They're getting closer to hitting their targets. You don't want to give them more and more chances to fire off these ballistic missiles if you're Israel. So that's why I think this coming strike in Iran, you may see them really focus on the offensive capabilities, some of the defensive capabilities too, postpone the nuclear sites for maybe another day, because you got to keep yourself safe first before you start thinking about going after some of those more challenging targets.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, you've got a plane to catch, but final question. Timing for a potential Israeli attack. No one really knows, I think, except in Jerusalem in the war cabinet, but it would seem Israel's got to do this soon. It's been now over a week, and keeping Iran on their toes and on edge is a good thing, but it seems the thing has to come before the U.S. election, it would seem?
Yeah, I mean, for sure before the U.S. election, but, you know, I'm sure that's an ongoing discussion between Biden and his team and Bibi and his team. Yeah. Look, you know, I think there was a moment where the Israelis were thinking about 10/7, rewriting history, doing it on the anniversary of those attacks, claiming the day back. When I talked to Israeli friends about that, what they said was, you can't take a day of mourning away from Israelis. There were so many people, the hostage families and people who suffered from that attack. So I thought, hey, maybe October 8th.
Yeah.
Obviously, that day's passed. Then the thinking was, well, what about the couple days after that? Well, you got high holidays right now in Israel leading up to Yom Kippur, which is Saturday. That probably means we probably won't see an attack until after that. So Sunday or beyond, but don't forget, there's other holidays that come after that.
True.
I'll tell you, I think the Israelis, their primary concern needs to be to make sure they get it done right.
Yeah. Secondary
concern is making sure that it's fully coordinated with the White House so that there's no daylight after that attack takes place. Because the Israelis are going to need possibly some help from the U.S. in terms of missile defense, CENTCOM in the region, who knows. And then I think maybe the last thing to think about is the Israelis know that if they fire off those, you know, that they attack in that next round, then there'll be probably a response coming in from the Iranians.
Yeah.
So they got to be thinking about their own people too, because these people have gone through a year of war. And it is a psychological issue. There's trauma knowing that these missiles are going to come in. No doubt. So I got to say, being the Prime Minister of Israel is probably the hardest job in the world.
Agreed.
I don't envy the decisions that these guys are making, but I know that they're giving it a lot of thought, and they're actually thinking about strategy, which is something we could learn from here in the United States.
Absolutely. And do you think, Jonathan, that we've seen really in the past few weeks alone, certainly with the weakening of Hezbollah, have we seen the beginnings of a new Middle East here, perhaps, where the Iranian axis is no longer that player that it was?
Look, that's the hope, right? You get Hamas essentially destroyed. You get Hezbollah severely weakened, maybe pushed past the Litani, maybe overthrown by a new government in Lebanon if we all play our cards right. The Houthis, obviously, they're not a particularly strong force. They could be defeated.
It's not an existential threat.
Right, it's not. I mean, I'd like to see them, you know, actually defeated in Yemen. I'd like to see the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria defeated. They're probably not going anywhere. So Iran's going to always have some leverage in the region, but if you see Hamas, Hezbollah, and you see a regime that is put back into its place, I think that does open up the door to normalization with Saudi Arabia. And after that happens, the dominoes start to fall. That's what we're looking for. That's the hope.
Golden opportunity, Jonathan. Great analysis, great breakdown as always, my friend. Folks, the one and only Jonathan Schanzer. Follow him on X, FDD.org, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Great stuff, Jonathan. We'll see you again soon.
Pleasure.
Excellent.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload. And tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.